ENI has announced a significant oil discovery in CTP Block 4 offshore Ghana. Preliminary estimates place the potential of the Akoma complex between 500 and 700 million barrels of oil equivalent in place. The 1X well is the second well drilled in CTP Block 4 following the Akoma discovery. In a statement, ENI said that the new discovery has been assessed following comprehensive analysis of extensive 3D seismic data sets and well data acquisition, including pressure measurements, fluid sampling, and intelligent formation testing with state-of-the-art technology. The production testing data shows a well deliverability potential estimated at 5,000 barrels per day, similar to the wells already in production from Sankofa field. The estimated hydrocarbon in place between the Sankofa field and the Akoma complex is now in excess of 1.1 billion barrels of oil equivalent, and further oil in place upside could be confirmed with an additional appraisal well. Due to its proximity to existing infrastructure, the new discovery can be fast-tracked to production with a subsea tie-in, with the aim to extend its production plateau and increase production. Today, we focus on Ghana and ENI making a major oil discovery. I'm Tolulokwe Adilere Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. From Accra, Ghana is Benjamin Ato Kwanzaa. He's a financial analyst as well as an oil and gas industry expert. Benjamin, welcome once again to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Benjamin, before this particular announcement, what was the status of ENI's investment in Ghana's oil and gas industry?
ENI has been exploring for oil for quite some time now in Ghana. I think that the fields that they have been, or the wells that they've been drilling, or the fields that they've been exploring, didn't seem to have so much potential for them, and that's the reason why this discovery has gained a lot of attention. ENI has been in the country for a while now, and they've had certain agreements with some downstream oil and gas companies in terms of bunkering contract and all of that. But I think that this is the discovery that is most significant for them at this time.
All right. So we've seen that Ghana has been keen to unlock more of its resources, especially after it began pumping from the celebrated Jubilee oil field in 2010. Since then, we've seen two more producing fields, TEN or TEN and Sankofa. In 2018, we saw 16 oil and gas firms submit applications for one or more of 5 Ghanaian offshore blocks in the country's first exploration licensing round. What's been the outcome of that? This is 2021. That was 2018. Now we're celebrating a new discovery with ENI. But in between that time, what's happened particularly within the industry in that particular sector?
I think that the fields that have been discovered continue to receive significant development. Even Tullow Oil PLC has recently announced the drilling of 2 additional wells at the Jubilee field in an effort to increase production declines that have been predicted to happen in the near future. And these are parts of strategy of this is just a part of a strategy for a multi-well drilling program in both of these fields. And if everything goes on as planned, it is quite likely that significant discoveries will continue to be made steadily since 2007, when oil was first discovered in Ghana. Production has been increasing steadily, and with this ENI discovery as well, we expect that production is going to even skyrocket.
Okay. Do we have a timeline in particular for this field, when it will come on, when things will be ready to export? Right now, it's a discovery, of course, but we are expecting to see some timelines and deliverables along the way. What are we looking at?
It's difficult to say because with these kind of things, the explorers usually remain a bit tight-lipped until they are quite certain about exactly what is happening. But gun to head, I would say since the discovery has been made public at this time, we will be looking somewhere second to third quarter of 2022.
Okay, second to third quarter of 2022. Between Jubilee and now this discovery, are we saying there have been no other major discoveries for Ghana in that time?
No other major discoveries. I mean, there have been discoveries that are not commercially viable for the companies that are doing these explorations. But the E&I discovery is what we are focused on now, especially with a number of barrels per day that is projected to come from this well, from their fields in the well.
All right, so let's look at a recent court case that is involving E&I and their Sankofa field. So a commercial court in Ghana recently ordered that 30% of revenue from the Sankofa offshore field be placed in an escrow account, and that court granted the request of a local operator which has an adjacent field to Sankofa, and that's Springfield. They operate the Afina oil field, and they've said that they want the court to preserve revenue from Sankofa until the two companies can reach a deal to combine the projects. Then each will get a share of the project. The court said its decision would protect the interest of Springfield while allowing Sankofa, which produces over 50,000 barrels of oil per day, to continue operating and cover its own costs. Now, E&I has said they're assessing this, the judgment of the court, and they'll come back. But in terms of how this new discovery fits into this conversation, where do you think that is?
Firstly, this conversation about E&I and then Springfield unitizing their fields to preserve their revenues and all of that. It's not the first time this is happening. E&I went to Springfield a number of years ago to try and unitize this, but an agreement wasn't reached at that time. This court case, I believe, is not in the best interest of E&I, especially considering the fact that they were the ones who moved first to Springfield to try and then unitize this. E&I will not be very happy about this because, especially with this new discovery, which is going to make Springfield enjoy from something that they have not necessarily sowed. It's going to be really hard. I think that E&I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that each person works on their, or each company works on their own oil field.
Is Springfield a local company?
It is locally owned. It's 100% locally owned Ghanaian company.
Do you think that might have influenced the court's decision in any way?
It is possible, but I mean, our courts are. I have a lot of faith in the integrity of our courts, and I believe that whatever is equitable is what the court is going to grant.
All right, so Benjamin, we're going to take a quick break here, and let's hold on. Let's look at Ghana's revenue when we come back from crude oil production. Beyond that, we'll also look at the ongoing work to rehabilitate the Tema oil refinery. And as Benjamin alluded to earlier, many people are interested in how the barrels per day production for Ghana will increase in the near future. We'll have the details when we come back. This is Business Edge. Now, Benjamin Atokanza is still with me from Accra, Ghana, as we look at that major oil discovery coming out of Ghana in association with E&I, the international oil major. Now, Benjamin, the 2020 annual management report of the Public Interest and Accountability Committee shows that crude oil production fell by 6.3% in 2020 from the 2019 volume. And this was the first of such drops following more than 3 consecutive oil production increases. So now with this new discovery, with some of the activities happening in Ghana's oil sector particularly, what's the new outlook? Is this going to change the outlook for 2021? What do you think it's going to be?
Well, it is likely that revenues for Ghana for crude oil will increase, I mean, with this new discovery. But considering the fact that the average price of oil was a little over about $40 per barrel, and the current average is around $55 per barrel, it is likely that revenues are going to increase. Nevertheless, a lot can change in 6 months. I mean, we saw that in 2021. We saw that in 2020. We are still waiting for an agreement for the OPEC Plus meeting ongoing, and whatever is decided will have an impact on whatever projection that the government of Ghana can make. But what is important is that the government of Ghana cushions itself against potential shocks from this meeting. A lot of factors, many of which aren't directly under the influence of Ghana, will come into play. Yes, in making sure, in making such a projection. But barring any significant negative deviations from current averages and predictions, we expect to earn much more than we did in 2020 from crude oil.
So you mentioned about Ghana, the government of Ghana trying to find a way to protect itself from the shocks of whatever the decision may come, and of course, whatever fluctuations we may see on the international market when it comes to the crude oil price. How do you think Ghana's government can do that?
I think that Ghana's government can do that simply by making sure that it enters into proper agreements with companies that are off-takers for its oil that is being drilled at the moment. If proper agreements are entered into, the right hedges are used, then it is likely that potential shocks won't be as damning as they would be if these things are not done.
So let's talk about the Tema oil refinery now. There is an ongoing rehabilitation work there to help and to hopefully take the refinery to full production capacity. What's the project timeline that we're looking at? And do you really think that at the completion of this project, that it has the impact to really improve Ghana's downstream sector and also lead to some particular improvements in the price, particularly for Ghanaians at the pump and with anything evolving or revolving around the price of the finished product?
In terms of timelines, it's difficult to say because this issue about Tor revamping its infrastructure has been on the table for so long. Recently, a 3-member interim management committee was constituted to revamp or to handle this project. At the moment, it's difficult for me to say, but maybe with the constitution of this new 3-member interim management committee, they are going to take this project by the horns and make sure that it is more stabilized. Now, in terms of the pricing and how it affects the downstream oil sector and how it affects prices at the pump, I don't think that it's going to have so much of an effect. Tor can currently refine about 45,000 barrels of oil per day. And in the grand scheme of the national daily consumption of various petroleum products, Tor can only supply a small fraction of that. Apart from that, most of the products from the refinery do not really meet the minimum industry requirements set by the NPA, even though they have a dispensation to be able to sell this lower quality product or this lower quality refined product. Tor would need more infrastructural upgrades to make its refined products more desirable by players in the downstream petroleum sector.
Okay, so there's something else interesting we need to take note of. So while Ghana is celebrating along with ENI this major oil discovery, it comes just after another oil major announced that it was actually pulling stakes out of Ghana. ExxonMobil pulled out of the deep water oil prospect in Ghana just 2 years after the parties ratified an exploration and production agreement. The company relinquished the entirety of its stake, about 80%, in the deepwater Cape 3 Points block and resigned as its operator after fulfilling its contractual obligations during the initial exploration period. So obviously the search is on both sides, hopefully, for a new operator. But do we have an idea, an official statement now as to why ExxonMobil walked away? When that news broke, it was quite major, but there was a lot of, let's just say there was a lack of information as to why the company decided to take that particular decision. What do we know now?
Well, there's still a lack of information, but I think that ExxonMobil left Ghana due to personal reasons. Firstly, the quantity of oil in Ghana available for drilling is really far below the typical activity scenario for an oil giant like ExxonMobil. Ghana, in the field that ExxonMobil was in the Cape 3 Points block level, I mean, typically it's around about 10 times that. And this huge variance most likely didn't look interesting to them. You may ask, why did they enter into the agreement in the first place? It was because there wasn't a lot of information at that time. Now, in addition to that, the energy transition factor typically, or not typically, but played a key role in getting them disinterested in the potentials of our wells. Across the world, major oil firms are slowly transitioning into the development of more than to exit Ghana. However, members of the main opposition party have alluded to unnecessary and excessive government intervention together with underhand dealings as being the main catalyst for the exits of ExxonMobil. At this point, they are mostly allegations, but what I think is what I've mentioned to you about the personal reasons for which ExxonMobil has left Ghana.
All right, so let me also talk about Aker Energy ASA, which also recently confirmed a significant offshore resource base in Ghana. And they've said they're committed to scaling up new developments in the deepwater Tano Cape 3 Points block. Now, Ghana is saying that it expects to more than double crude oil production over the next 4 years. So while there might be a limit to the crude oil and whatever is off the shores of Ghana, the country obviously is deciding that they want to exploit it as much as they possibly can. But this also comes when you hear from somebody like the former Minister of Energy, Emmanuel Kofoboa, who has said that he's worried that the sector could collapse. Let me quote what he said. If Ghana does not find more hydrocarbon resources and develop these fields, the worst fear is that the service industry, which is already feeling the impact of the lack of activity and is dying slowly, will go into bankruptcy. If the trend continues, this must worry well-meaning Ghanaians. So let's look, what is really the true picture of what's happening in the industry? There are developments, there are investments coming in, there are people also deciding to leave. Now, Aker took over the field that was owned by Hess. Hess has sold that to them. So how are we balancing what we see as investments coming in and then the decisions of some notable individuals also in the industry to decide to leave Ghana as well? Is it a profitable business for any company in the next few years? And sustainable?
Well, it is. I mean, in the short to medium term, at least, I think that the energy transition is catching up with Ghana and the players in the industry. We have recently discovered our oil, and around the same time that other parts of the world are transitioning from dependency on oil. And so it is in the interest of the country, or it's in the interest of the government to make sure that we exploit as much oil as we can. For those who are leaving, just like I alluded to in the previous question, it is mostly due to personal reasons, reasons that are not in line with the strategic direction of the companies that of their companies. And so for them, it is their reasons. For the government to ramp up production, it is basically to exploit the resources as quickly as possible before oil becomes an obsolete resource and not something that any well-meaning nation can make or can base revenue projections on.
Okay, Benjamin, we'll leave it at that for now. It is something to celebrate, and apparently there are very serious plans on the ground to increase Ghana's crude oil production. As I said earlier, the government has said they're looking to more than double production over the next 4 years, putting it up to about some 500,000 barrels per day. Do you think that's a possibility in the next 4 years? Can Ghana hit that number?
It is, especially looking at what is happening right now. Tullow Oil is drilling additional wells in the fields that they operate in. ENI has made other significant discoveries. Aker Energy is developing their fields. A lot of work is ongoing in the upstream sector and upstream oil sector in Ghana. And I think that in the next few years, very soon, I mean, the IMF, I think, put a projection at around 500,000 barrels of oil by 2024. I think that it is very possible, but I mean, 2021 to 2024 is still a long way away, and a lot of things can happen in between. So all we have to do is watch and be hopeful.
All right, Benjamin Atokwanza joining me from Accra, Ghana. Thank you as always. I'll see you sometime soon. All right, this is Business Edge. We have a few stories that we're keeping a very close eye on, and we'll be sharing them with you right after this. This is NC4 to watch, and here are a few stories that we're keeping a close eye on for you. Ethiopia is trying a new method of dealing with debt. Now, the country is in the process of restructuring an additional $1 billion of debt as it seeks to free up funds to support its economic recovery amid the global COVID-19 pandemic. However, the plan to restructure doesn't include Euro bonds. According to the Finance Ministry, restructuring the debts will provide a grace period of 6 years and extend the maturity by 10 years. Already $2.5 billion in principal and interest payments have been postponed for 5 years by commercial creditors under the first external debt restructuring scheme. South Africa's liquidity position is remaining stable beyond June as the country's gross reserves increased marginally, though gold reserves slipped. The SA Reserve Bank said that the country's gross reserves ticked up 0.6% to $54.47 billion, about 778 billion rand, in June from $51.14 billion in May. Third on our list, a new rail project in Kenya faces further delays after the country failed to ink a 16 billion Kenyan shilling financial deal with France. The project entails constructing a railway line linking Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to Nairobi's city center. It also includes constructing a 5-kilometer meter gauge line connecting the airport to standard gauge rail terminals elsewhere. This means that the rail project, whose construction was initially set for August following a deal agreed between French President Emmanuel Macron and President Uhuru Kenyatta in March 2019, faces further delays. And finally, power generation companies have declared that Nigeria's available electricity capacity has dropped by about 3,000 megawatts. The executive secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies, Dr. Joy Ogaji, said that the available generation capacity plunged from about 9,000 megawatts to 6,000 megawatts, adding that not all of the current capacity was being utilized. Figures obtained from the Federal Ministry of Power show that the highest quantum of power that was utilized in Nigeria as of July 6, 2021 was 4,370.7 megawatts. And that wraps everything up on this edition of Business Edge. As always, thank you for joining us. You have us on YouTube, our websites. We are live 24 hours a day on StarTimes channel 274. And of course, you can download our mobile app and take us with you wherever you are. Just look for News Central TV Africa in your app store, of course, your Play Store. I'm Tolulokwe Adilere Balogun. I'll see you tomorrow.